let's speak about closing system for dual tube shock absorbers. In the past, the closing system more frequent was this. There was the body of the shock absorber that was thread. Inside there was the guide with the oil seal, and everything was closed with a thread ring that was thread inside. In this way, it was possible to screw the thread ring into the body and to close the system. This solution, the last shock absorber closed with this system was the front shock absorber of Golf 1 and Second series. It was very easy to reman. In fact, it was very easy to open the shock absorber, to change the oil seal, and everything was done. The problem of this system was that it was quite expensive for the OE, and at the same time was reducing the business of new shock absorbers and replacement. So most of the manufacturers decided to move from this solution to this. In this case, between the guide and the body, there was a metal cap that was welded, fixing everything. This solution is quite similar on American shock absorbers and Japanese shock absorbers made in Japan. This solution is much more common in European shock absorbers, especially via Sauto, Bogue Sachs, Monroe, and many others, as well as in KWB shock absorbers made in Malaysia or Chinese shock absorbers. In this case, the body of the shock absorber is bent over the guide sealing. Of course, in this case, it's possible to use the oil seals that we saw previously. When the shock absorber is closed with this system, Emetec suggests to reman in the following way. You have to cut the shock absorber here, or more or less. You can cut it with the Mangusta or with the lathe machine, and we will see it on detail later. Then you have to remove all the parts that are inside. Then you have to thread the body in. You have to reduce the length of the inner cylinder, because in this way the guide moves down, allowing to fix a thread ring into the tube. And in this way you move from this solution to this. We will see the solution in practice later. When the shock absorber is closed with this system, we have to use different solutions that we will see later. So now, suppose that you have a shock absorber closed by bending, and the oil seal is a drawing 11. Okay? So as you can see, when bending the body of the shock absorber on the oil seal, the lower lip is deformed, sealing with the body with the guide. Okay? You can also see that there is the volume that we spoke before, where oil can stay and drop down. Sorry for the drawings, they are quite simple, but they are also quite clear. Now, if you have to reman this kind of shock absorber, the solution is very simple. You have to cut the shock absorber here with the Mangusta or the lathe machine, doesn't mind. Once you have cut the shock absorber here, you have two possibilities. The first solution, the first possibility is to remove all the parts, to thread the body in, to reduce the length of the inner cylinder, to place the original guide, to place a new oil seal with the same design, and to fix everything with a thread ring. This is the most simple solution. You just have to check the oil seal into Emetec catalog and to choose an equivalent one with the same dimension. So with the same family, drawing 11, with the same inner dimension and with the same outer dimension. It is very easy to do it. You have to take our catalog and to check in the green part, you have to choose the family 11 and then to look to D1, that is the rod diameter, and D, that is the outer diameter of the oil seal. Otherwise, you can check on the orange section and look all the oil seals with the same inner diameter. The other solution is to make the same operation, but then sealing with a top gun. It means that you will use an oil seal without the lower lip that will be replaced with an O-ring. If you use this solution, so you use an oil seal like the original, you will have a wider, you need a wide range of oil seals. In this case, you can reduce the range of oil seals on stock. Now, suppose that you have a shock absorber with an oil seal belonging to drawing 10. And again, the shock absorber bend on the guide and the oil seal. As you can see, the oil seal is sealing the rod here and here. Now, the remanufacturing of this shock absorber can be done in different ways. The most simple solution is to cut the shock absorber here, to remove all the parts, to reduce the length of the cylinder, to thread the body, and to modify the guide in order to fit it an oil seal drawing 11. Of course, the guide must be very thick, because if it is thin, you cannot make this operation. Remember that if you reduce the thickness of the guide, it gets less resistant. So use this solution only with the guide is thick enough. Here we have the same solution, but instead of an oil seal drawing 11, we are choosing an oil seal drawing 5, so a top gun with an O-ring. So it's like here, but with an O-ring instead of a lower lip. The third solution is to use an oil seal like the original. So drawing 10 with the lip on the top. But in this case, we cannot fit the thread ring directly on the lip, because doing this, the oil could escape from the guide goes into the thread and escapes. So in order to avoid that this can happen, we are obliged to add an O-ring in blue here, sealing between the guide and the body, and an additional component that is this kind of centering device that will keep the O-ring centered versus the body of the shock absorber. This component is very important, the centering device is very important, because suppose that you don't put it. In this case, when screwing the ring, the O-ring can be smashed and not sealing properly the shock absorber. A fourth solution could be this. As you can see, the guide has been modified. Has been modified because this part has been removed. Has been made flatter in order to put a centering device. In this case, has been fitted upside down in comparison with this. Then there is the O-ring, and then there is a top gun, an oil seal drawing 5, and then it's closed with a thread ring. In which cases this solution is used? This solution is used in those shock absorbers where the operator, for any reason, has broken the guide. And this happens quite often, especially on very big shock absorbers, where the shock absorber is very big, where the body of the shock absorber is very thick, so you make a lot of force by hand or with the mangusta or with the lathe machine, and making a lot of force here, at the end you break the guide here. In these cases, you make the guide flatter, you add the centering device, and you close using this solution. The last solution is this. In this case, the thread is made outside instead of inside. And you close everything with the thread ring having the thread inside. The closing system is made using an oil seal like the original, an O-ring in this area, and a centering device. The centering device avoids that the O-ring gets smashed. This solution is used on those cases where you must be sure that the remanufactured shock absorber will be very resistant. So, for instance, when the shock absorber is very hard in rebound, or when the body is very thin, or in light alloy shock absorbers. In light alloy shock absorbers, it's better to thread outside, because in this way, when you close with the thread ring, you increase the resistance of all the group. Also, in other cases like military applications or on trucks and so on. Let's see now what happens when you have a shock absorber that has been close welding. Since it has been close welding, all this part becomes only one component because completely welded. And the guide cannot be removed from the green cap. So even if you cut here, you are obliged to remove a lot of metal here and all this part of the shock absorber. For this reason, you are obliged to cut here, because here remains in any case damage. Cutting here, you lose 2 or 3 centimeters of the original body. Then you cannot thread the body inside because you will lose an additional centimeter. You cannot have a final shock absorber that is 4 centimeters shorter than the original. It's not acceptable. One thing is to have a shock absorber that is 1 centimeter shorter than the original. It's not a problem. But 4 centimeters are too much. So in these cases, the only solution is to cut the shock absorber here, to fit a manifold that will be welded again, and into this manifold you put a new guide, a centering device guiding the new guide with the manifold, an oil seal, an O-ring, an oil seal, and a thread ring. In this case, a drawing 5, a top gun, is suggested. Of course, this solution requires a lot of job and is the most expensive. There are many other situations, problems that you could approach. So in the doubt, please contact Emetec and we will find a common solution. Thank you.